Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read each chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch, and if you're looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 29 of Breaking Step. Tibs paused as soon as he saw through the broken window and extended his sense until it covered the entire house. It was at the edge of the part of Craggle Rock. There's part of Craggle Rock the townsfolk had started referring to as the poor neighborhood. Some called it Broken Place. Whatever others called it, Tibbs knew the street when he looked down on it. What he couldn't understand was how his town had acquired it. But that was something to be dealt with later, like so many things he needed to handle. While not within the confines of the street, the house was still neglected. It made for a good location for one of the guards to want to meet in secret or for them to set a trap for him. He only sensed one person, two floors below, on the ground floor, along with 3 dogs lounging at her feet. He relaxed slightly and headed for the partially open door. He thought he could trust Serba, but she was a Wells. Jekyll had made a point of reminding Harry that Wells either led or followed. Tibbs wasn't sure if being the head of her pack of dogs made her a leader, or whose orders she followed if it didn't. He moved cautiously along the hall of the stairs, alert for anything odd within his sense or sounds out of place. Anything odd? Odd or sounds out of place. He knew enough about essence to not believe darkness was the only element that allowed someone to not. Ugh. Okay, this is clunky. He knew enough about essence. He knew enough about essence to not. Okay. He knew enough about essence to know. Okay, what I want to say is he knew enough about essence to know darkness wasn't. Let's fix that. The only element that allowed someone to be undetected, to remain undetected. Undetected. Now, I would like a different way of saying that because there's a new here. I don't want the verb know twice so close together. He knew enough about essence, and that's probably how I ended up with this clunky thing here. He knew enough about essence to not believe, he knew enough about essence not to believe. You know what? That might be enough. Not to believe. Darkness. Okay, and it was okay. That's why this wasn't a negation. He knew enough about essence not to believe darkness was the only element that allowed someone to remain undetected. That actually works better. From what he'd seen, every element could do its version of what any other element did, if the user was strong and knowledgeable enough. The guild certainly was both. Halfway down the stairs to the ground floor, a dog growled and Serba stood. Next time she asked for a secret meeting, Tibbs wasn't trusting to his skill to remain hidden. He had darkness, so he should use it. Serba had a hand on her sword when Tibbs stepped into the lamplight. It was well made, he sensed reflexively, better made than what the other guards carried. Keeping alert for blades destined for his back had made him notice the difference in the way the essence aligned in the metal that told of its quality. This was so well aligned that Tibbs had to pay close attention to sense it wasn't the work of active essence, but something of how high its quality was. You just can't help sneaking around, can you? She said, moving her hand off the pommel. I have to be careful when your commander considers me a troublemaker. Are you saying you aren't? She said with a snort, sitting. He joined her at the table and Thump nuzzled his leg as soon as he sat. I'm doing what I have to so the town's safe. He broke the jerky into smaller pieces and dropped them on the floor. A second dog, lean and golden-furred, joined Thump, while she kept a hand on the third, the large black one he'd seen her with recently. Why did you want to meet? I thought you'd want to know where your stuff's kept. The equipment that was confiscated a few weeks ago. She added at his frown. Getting that back would be good. It would let him equip the new teams until his first batch arrived. What are they? The floor below the cells. He frowned. I didn't know there was a floor under them. Neither did I until I was part of the team that raided a supply of restweed a few days ago. We had to bring that there directly instead of the usual processing team. When you reach the bottom of the stairs leading to the cell, it's that door on the left before the guards. There isn't a door on the left, Tibs stated. Just a corridor on the right that leads to the room they keep the equipment they take off us for our stay. Now there's a door there. The stairs are behind it. At the bottom, there's a clerk who writes who writes down everything we brought, who wrote, okay. There's a clerk who wrote down everything we brought. Brought in, yeah, that would work. There's also, it's also who has the key that opens the door where everything is kept. I can't tell you where beyond that your stuff will be, but that's where everything confiscated ends up. Tibs narrowed his senses to her, but she had nothing enchanted. He sensed dogs, and she might not think he considered she'd hide it there. Nothing. Did they give you something before you headed there? No, why? Have you noticed how the dimensions inside the guild building always seem to change? I don't have to reason to go there often. She considered something. But something did feel odd when I did. Erdian said it's part of the building security. How did you get him to tell you that? Tibs stared at her. I asked. And he just told you? She replied suspiciously. He wanted me to understand how hopeless any thought I might have to break in was. Probably so I didn't try to get my stuff back. Maybe those enchantments do more than make the dimensions different. Maybe they hide part of the building. There was no door on the left any time they took me to the cells. But there was one for me. She was thoughtful. Can they really do that? Tibs chuckled. The dungeon lets us bypass entire floors by walking through a doorway. Someone with light as their element can make shapes and colors out of it, so the guild hiding a door isn't something I even question. Although he was curious about how they'd hidden the difference in the weave. She nodded. Then it must have been adjutant brooch. Adjutant is the term that I used. I'll have to fix that. Adjutant brooch, who had whatever let us through. He met us at the guild's entrance and was with us the entire time. Who is he? He's one of the commander's subordinate, if he's in charge of something like that. Can you get me more information on him? I'll need to get whatever it is that lets him make the door visible. She considered it, then stood. I'll see what I can find out. Again, he sighed. He was tired of these attempts to kill him. Each one meant he had to waste time dealing with leading the would-be assassin somewhere discreet, deal with the attempt, and then dispose of the body. None of that took long anymore, but it was still time better spent working toward making his plan happen. He walked among the crowd, using the large amount of corruption on them to keep track of the assassin tailing him until an alley he knew was rarely used between the tannery and dyeing shop came into view. He picked up speed as soon as he was in it, making it two buildings in before the assassin stepped into the alley. He turned and pulled darkness from his bracer to wrap around himself before stepping into the nook of a doorway. The woman who hurried past him could be a merchant's wife. She wore a dress that seemed utilitarian in spite of the frill of the fabric. He sensed knives and poisons among its fold, and it could contain other things he didn't know could be used to kill. That string of metal that he'd ignored would have killed him when that assassin wrapped it around his neck, if metal could hurt him anymore. A garrote, Duran had told him it was when Tibs had showed him that string with the wooden handles at each end. He stepped behind her and placed a hand on the back of her neck. He absorbed the life of Essence before she was done reaching for a knife, and her lifeless body dropped at his feet. He considered searching her. She could be the one with a clue to how to hand these attempt, but it would be more time he didn't have. So he softened the ground until she disappeared under it. He let her fall below the building's foundation to ensure she wouldn't be accidentally dug up, then hardened the ground until it was as it had been. Then he continued on his way. Tibbs watched the team step away from the check table after receiving the meager copper the guild let him keep. Let's go plural on this. The meager coppers. The guild let them keep for walking out of the dungeon whole, if not uninjured. The one in the lead was their archer, lean and angry looking. The sorcerer was a petite girl who might barely be older than Tibbs. The rogue was on par with the archer in age, but she looked happier. The two fighters looked the same, reminding him of Deher and Duran, the twins Don had kept around in the early days. Hi, he greeted, not moving from the shop he leaned against as they approached. The look the archer gave him was filled with mistrust. I know who you are, light fingers, he said harshly. None of them can shut up about the hero of this abyss of a place. He motioned to the building and tents. Tibbs nodded. I'd like to make you an offer. The archer snorted. No thanks. I've got enough of dealing with the last offer someone from this place made me. Greg, the sorcerer said, something older than she looked. We should at least hear what he has to offer. It's not like we have to say yes. And you're going to believe one word he says? Greg snapped. I believed them when they said that if I went with the guards, they'd take me to a better place where I wouldn't have to worry about what people thought of who my family had been, where I'd be free and the people there would see to it I had a roof over my head, food on my plate, and skills to learn. Now, one of them mentioned that thing. He pointed to the dungeon's entrance. The guild lies, Tibbs agreed. And you work for them, don't you, hero of cracked rock? It's Craggle Rock, the archer snorted. I don't work for them. I'm a runner like you. I protect the town because the guild won't. They're just claiming they do and using what we runners do as their own. Do as their own. And you're letting them? The rogue asked. What can I do to stop them? Tibbs replied with a shrug. What are you offering? One of the fighters asked. You seriously want to hear his lies? The archer asked, and Tibbs waited for them to come to an agreement. I'm with Ashan, the fighter said. We aren't risking anything by listening to him. Blue means water, right? It's not like that can do anything to make us think differently. You think magic's needed to make you believe lies? The archer asked. What did they tell you to get you to come here? Nothing, the other fighter said. They gathered us out of the camps the prisoners were kept in and escorted us here. It wasn't until that guy told us all what this place was about we found out. And no, the twin said as the archer opened his mouth, we aren't okay with it, but me and my brother plan on surviving. I figured that if one of them is willing to help, at least the least I have to do is listen. The others nodded, and the archer threw his hand up. Fine, he faced Tibbs. What are you offering? Tibbs was impressed. His team had decided the opposite of what he wanted, and instead of storming away, he went with it. Now, to see if he could convince them to accept his offer, because this was one Timmy had high hopes for. Tibbs pushed a wall and revealed the corridor on the left, which opened to the room with the chest. He checked it for trapped, then opened it and left it for the others to handle its content. The exit had closed, like the previous time. On the opposite side, 2 tiles further in, he put his hand on the wall and paused. If he was wrong about that part of the pattern, this could lock his friends in. He pushed. He wasn't wrong. He listened, and as he expected, there were no echoes of walls moving. That was dangerous, Don said, standing in the opening of the chest room. No, I knew nothing would happen. He walked to the end of the hall and pushed the wall facing him instead of taking the left turn. It didn't move. On the previous run, it had moved 4 tiles until it stopped, and the right wall had moved 2, then revealed the switch that with a dragon crest over it. It had opened the entrance again. The only difference between then and now was that wall he'd pushed in. It pushed 1 tile in, and that they hadn't fought the golem people, but this would tell him if that fight was part of the pattern or not. Looking over his shoulders, his team was in the hall. Push that wall until it stops. Jekyll did so, and with the first grumbling came an echo Tibs couldn't locate. It moved again, without 1 this time. It's not moving anymore, Jekyll called. You want me to push the one on the left like last time? That triggered another attack, Mez pointed out as Tibs was about to say yes, since that was part of what he needed to test. Tibs had forgotten about that one. Let me get in place. He could test the wall after that, after the fight. Tibs stood in the opening and nodded to Jekyll and focused on sensing through the miasma. He knew what to expect. What he needed was to be able to... There. He looked up and made out the shimmering on the ceiling as a team of golden people dropped through it, turning in his direction. With a curse, Tibs stepped back, the fighter and rogue landing closer than he'd expected. Like the previous run, they both had earth as their element. Tibs jumped to the side as the rogue threw the manifested knife. He cursed again as he remembered Dawn meant he couldn't coat his sword with the essence. With that essence. Wait, what? With corruption. With corruption as a way of getting, as a way to get through the protection their element granted them. Tibs formed a shield and readied himself as the sorcerer stepped into the hallway his friends were in, only to fly out. Jekyll trailing behind it. Fire hit the archer, staggering it back. Then Tibs had to focus on his fight, blocking the fighter's sword while slashing at the rogue. He jumped back, then ducked to let Cumdar swing his darkness-covered staff over him, sending the rogue stumbling aside. Out the corner of his eyes, lightning jumped from the sorcerer's hand as he blocked the fighter's attack with his shield, moving away from the cleric, taking on the rogue. The fighter raised its arm for another attack, and Tibs took advantage of the opening, stabbing forward and lengthening his sword until it pierced the golem's chest. Unlike with a real person, all this caused was for it to lose some of the life essence that powered it. Tibs, Don called as he pulled the sword out. Out of the way! He threw himself at the rogue, focused on Cumdar, and together they dispatched it quickly. The fighter was already melting under the corruption with an angry cry, Jekyll broke the sorcerer into 2. His armor was scorched and smoking where the lightning hit it. The archer and other fighter were already broken and absorbed by the dungeon. Lightning, Don said, indicating the crumbling sorcerer. Earth, earth, wood. He pointed to where the archer must have been by the quiver that remained, and metal. The same as the 2 fights on our last run. Is that a coincidence? Can't be. Can it be if the dungeon makes everything here? Jekyll asked. Only the loot is in the chest is random, Tibs asked. Everything else happens because the dungeon wants it to. He headed for the end of the hall and pushed the wall. Anytime something changes, it's because the dungeon is reacting to us getting too good. 4 tiles, and he pushed the wall on the left. We must not be there yet. Twice, and the switch was exposed. He pulled it and heard a wall move. The exits opened. Mez called. I'll check something. Appears I moved the stop and the right wall and moved to. Okay, that's the right. So I need to. Getting. He pushed the wall on the right. We must not be there. Twice, and the switch was exposed. He pulled it and heard a wall move. The exits open. The exits open. Mess called. I know. Tibbs returned to the corridor leading to the chest room and tried the wall on the left. This time it didn't move, confirming his suspicion. If we open the exit, we are locking the room and can't continue. It makes sense. The dungeon is going to limit our options, Don said. So we have to decide if we leave or continue this early in the room? Jekyll asked. Or do we have to proceed while making sure the level remains accessible? I don't seem to have trouble with how much Jekyll had said. Don't think so. It seems overly complicated. We do not know if a passage will have opened. If a passage we have open can then be closed by opening a further one, or if those can then be opened again, Commodore said. Because of that, I expect there are multiple switches, Don said, and each one will be a chance for us to pick between leaving and continuing. We're going to have to test that with the next switch we find. Tibbs nodded. And since you pulled the switch, Jekyll said, this means this run's done. At least we got the loot from that chest and fight out of it, and we're going to get more on the way out, as added. The wall couldn't move until after the chest was open, Tibbs said. That's what you were checking, Don said thoughtfully. That means we need to build a map of our progress and what the stages are where each wall can be moved. I'm putting you in charge of that, Jekyll said, heading for the exit. Good job dealing with that fighter. Thank you, the fighter replied uncertainly. It was simpler, since its attention was on Tibbs initially. Maybe we need to do that all the time, Mez said. Have Tibbs attract them so we can take them from the back. That only works if I tell you an attack is coming, Tibbs replied, following Jekyll. Keeping that information to yourself is an easy way to end up not having help dealing with it, Don pointed out. Nah, Mez replied. Jekyll's always going to be there to rescue him. I thought it was Tibbs who kept rescuing him, Don said. We give and take, Tibbs said. It is how healthy relationships are built, Commodore pointed out. I already have a man, Jekyll called, and Tibbs basically my brother, so no trying to make him my special guy. And that concludes chapter 29 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of Royal and support me at the same time, my Patreon is about 20 chapters ahead. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the note, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.